Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, one episode in season at a time. And after what seemed like forever because of the little break, we are now at the end of season 7. And this, of course, is Robert and Amy's wedding. So it can be the last time you get to see this little turquoise one. After many seasons, many different goes at being in a relationship, long breakups, jealousy, getting back together, lots of headaches, hassles, and horse crap, disapproving parents in different regards, these two are finally tying the knot. And for Robert, it's a good thing. I mean, he's 47-ish in this episode, because he was 40 when the first episode debuted. So he'd be around 47, maybe 48, depending on when we look at it. Actually, yeah, it might be 48, but point is, it's about time he gets married to Amy here. Especially with all the big stuff we've had happen. That speech where he's like, oh yeah, I'm striking out. It's about time that they get married here. And when you watch this episode in syndication, they actually have a little montage of Robert Amy clips at the beginning that show everything they've been through, which, as I've said many times before, and we're actually nearing the end of me saying that with this episode. This is an episode that I did see in syndication the first time, so that's something I did see, that whole thing. In some instances, some of those clips, this was the first time I saw them. So when I actually got the DVD and had gone back and watched a lot of the episodes, being able to see this episode with all that context proper made this episode work a lot better for me. Now, this episode is written by Ray, and you can definitely tell he has his hands in here. Now, the episode starts, of course, at the house. Ray is not fully in his tuxedo yet, so when Deborah comes in, she's upset with him, like, you're not even dressed, I already got all the kids ready and all that. Kids go, mommy's yelling. And part of that is Ray, being the best man, he's supposed to do the toast, and he has not written it yet, mainly because he doesn't think he has enough material to actually do a good speech. And that's Ray's little subplot all throughout the episode, all the way up until the end scene where he actually gives the toast, is he doesn't have it written, and he's trying to think of stuff. And so I'm going to begin that in the prologue is good, especially since they're at the house. And after this, when we cut away and come back from opening credits and commercial, they're going to be at the venue, the church in Pennsylvania, where most of this first part of the episode and the beginning of the second part takes place, I should say. Now, once we cut away there, Ray's still trying to come up with stuff for the toast. Robert is, nervous, pacing in the bathroom, and he's interacting with the characters as they come in. Ray coming in, trying to get some little ideas off of him, and Robert's like, you got nothing for the toast. I got plenty. What do you got? Frank coming in like, oh yeah, I gotta clean this, I got egg on there. Which of course begins the comments and the little jokes about the venue and the fact that the reception is probably not going to be the best, considering that one, it's a cash bar, two, the buffet will probably be skimpy, which we all know Frank's going to be one to comment on that, but knowing Marie, she'll probably comment on the skimpiness too, even though at Ray's wedding, even though they helped pay for it, there were comments on it. I mean, wasn't it Marie's sister who did the little joke about the cold veal? Yep. And of course, Robert doesn't want to see Amy before the wedding, just so that there's not a kibosh on there. Well, she says that once Marie sneaks in the bathroom to talk with him. It's one of those things like, Marie, he said he wants to be by himself. Marie. Thankfully, in one regard, Ray gets Marie out of there, but that is going to come back to bite everybody in the butt later on when we get to the halfway point of the show. Now, since this is one long episode, it doesn't really have the traditional 3-act structure. It's more like an episode written in 5 acts. Now, when it's split up, the way they edit it makes it seem like it's two episodes each with a 3-act. But when you watch it as just one long episode, it's definitely 5 acts. The opening bit, and the little segue towards the wedding, and then the ending, and then it's just the way it goes. I mean, you can try to say it's 3 acts and that the middle act is super, super long, and then the third act is all the reception, but it's easier to look at it as a 5-act one. The short 5-act compared to, say, something like what Shakespeare would write. As they're all dealing with all the wedding shenanigans, Robert being nervous, Amy getting ready, we find out that Reverend Stevens, the one who is officiating the wedding, is not there. Which would be bad enough, but the word sabotage comes to mind when we find out it's Peter who is supposed to have picked him up. And given how disapproving we've seen Peter has been all throughout the last few episodes, especially the shenanigans he did last episode with Robert's bachelor party, we know he's doing this intentionally to try to get the wedding to not happen. I mean, he's the one that in the episode Meet the Parents, where he was trying to get Ray on his side to help sabotage the wedding. He does not want this wedding to go through, even though he knows it will hurt Amy for some reason. It's like one of those things like, I know it'll be a little pain, but she'll thank me for it later. No, she won't, Peter. She'll hate you for it if she finds out you're the one who intentionally sabotaged her wedding. And of course goes to Ray and Robert on the corner. Peter find out what happened to the Reverend. Then the Reverend shows up. Turns out he hitchhiked in. So Peter's one attempt at sabotage failed, and he doesn't do another one. Like, I think he's going to say something during the ceremony, but he doesn't. Now, Amy's parents don't really do anything major in this episode, even though you can still kind of tell they don't really approve of Robert, but they're not going to go out of their way to sabotage the wedding. Amy's mother is more like little comments where she's talking to her daughter, like happy to see her in the wedding gown, but it's not how she pictured it. And going with the wedding night comment. Now, as for Amy's dad, Hank, he only does one little thing, and that's when he's walking Amy down the aisle. And the thing where you hand the bride over to the husband, he doesn't let go at first, but eventually he does, and it goes into the actual wedding proper. And this is the end of what would be the first episode, when this episode is split apart for syndication. Does the whole usual thing, the names, if there's anyone here who has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now, forever hold your peace. Now, normally this is when someone's supposed to speak to say, hey, they cannot be married. One of the parties is still already legally married. Some other big revelation. But instead of that, Marie stands up because she has something to say. And this is where it would be split in half because of that. Now, longtime fans of the show, when this moment happens, it'd be like, and of course you do, Marie. You have to say something. You always got to be intrusive and put your 2 cents into everything, even when it's not a moment where you're supposed to. Now, of course, the Reverend, as he says, this has never happened before, so speak now. Now, Marie's whole thing, it's a long back and forth between her and Robert, but her whole thing is that she feels that these two should not be getting married for any other reasons other than it's for love. They should not rush into things. She thinks maybe that they're just rushing into it because of her, which I could see Marie having a point there if this was season 3 into season 4. Amy Robert, considering what happened near the end of season 3, the episode where Marie walked on them in the basement, and that whole argument that ends that episode. But here, with how many times they've gotten together and gotten broken up between then, and then of course them meeting each other randomly and getting back together, I don't think that little comment has any weight. Now, Amy's parents, when she brings up that, yeah, that's true. But as I've mentioned in previous episodes, no abuse, no current cheating, 2 consenting adults. I mean, they're both around their 40s. I mean, Robert's well into his 40s, almost into his 50s, and Amy, if you do the math right from season 2, she would be about to turn 40. Let's see. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. She'd be 38, so she's almost into her 40s. Yeah, at that point, it's all up to the parties. The parents really have no major say there. Unless they're going to try to pull, well, if you don't respect our wishes, we're not helping you pay for the wedding type thing. Which is like, good, go ahead. Go ahead, do that. See how far you get with that. So her pulling that, it's like, yeah, I think at this point, since we're at the ceremony, that whole part doesn't really concern the two and they don't care about it. Going back and forth, Robert does bring up a couple good points in this whole discussion, and that is that you have ruined every major event in my life. Bringing up the one play thing, and there's plenty of other stuff, the lucky suit, amongst other little moments. The only good counterpoint that Marie brings up is when she threw Joanne out of Robert's house. When we found out about the whole divorce thing, and Marie thought that she was doing the revelation of your wife's a stripper when Robert already knew. Yeah, that whole discussion. Now, her comment about being married only for love. Now, erase the fact that some consider marriage just the whole tax little thing. If you're getting married for a reason that you two actually want to be together, love is the primary reason too. I mean, everything else, like the tax things, those are just benefits from it. You know, those are added benefits of it, but for love, primary reason too. And as she puts it, it's the main thing that'll make it work. I mean, communication and all that is there, but if you don't have that underlying thing, then what's the point of the communication and all the other things that you got to do to make the marriage healthy and work? You got to have that love at the core of it. And of course, after all she has to say, she sits back down, the wedding continues, and we jump from that, and we skip over the rest of the ceremony, and then we get to the reception. And from the way that Robert and Amy walk in, you can tell as the audience that what happened at the ceremony is still weighing heavily on them. Not so much on Marie, because when she comes in and talks to them, you can tell, like, no skin off her nose, I'm actually starving. And of course, all the type of hijinks that we would expect at this ceremony, given what we learned the ceremony is going to be, the cash bar and all that happens. Frank goes over to get alcohol and is really upset the fact that it's a cash bar. Gets into a little argument with Hank when Hank is offered to buy his booze. They're like, yeah, you don't call us in and rip us off on the booze. And they get into a big old argument over it that Ray does come in and counteract. Then when Marie's like, no, I'm not going, even though she just made a little, one of her little usual comments about the spread of the buffet. When Frank wants to leave after the argument, Patricia's like, yeah, I think you should go. You brought down the whole air at the wedding. Oh, it was about them. No, it was for you. I think that's called narcissism. Now, Patricia really had a good point there. That all was for Marie. She could say it was for them, but it was all for Marie. We know every time Marie always puts her 2 cents into something, especially a situation where she should not be commenting on, it's all because of her own 2 cents, because she wants to feel important. And for that moment, yeah, that was her and her narcissistic, overbearing, critical, and intrusive nature. And I love the fact that Patricia called her out on it. And Ray's even excited, like, no one's ever said that to her. You're cool. But of course, considering they're still at the wedding, we've seen Patricia is not really the type of person to speak up, speak her mind so well, that she's so upset about it. And she starts crying on Ray's shoulder because she feels that she's contributed to the negative impact of the wedding. Now remember, while all this is going on, we got all the wedding guests around. Not many of them have lines, they're just background players, but they're probably watching all this going. Typical Barones. I can imagine after the fact, like, probably Johnny and Andy got together and had a little comment on it. Judy probably was telling some of the other officers who weren't invited to the wedding some of the hijinks that happened, and like, oh yeah, that sounds like Robert's mother right there. That sounds like something Robert's brother would say, stuff like that. And of course, Ray still hasn't come up with anything good for the toast. And then when the time for the toast comes, you can tell he still hasn't thought of something, because of the way he's talking. And I'll say Ray Romano plays this off beautifully, where he's still trying to come up with stuff. But then, as he even puts it, sometimes material presents itself. And he starts going off of all the material that's happened at the wedding and connecting it back to what you would expect from their family members. This is what Amy, she was getting into when she decided to marry Robert. She's not just getting a family, she's getting an entire mental hospital. The editing, and you can tell that everybody at the wedding is enjoying this, even when she's making comments about it. So it's like a nice, playful roast, not like a big, serious roast. And the way that Ray plays it off is very similar to the episode where he was supposed to be the auctioneer, where he doesn't really like it at first. He's not into it, but the moment he gets into it, the audience is really loving it, and he starts rolling with it. He's rolling it. You got to give her that. It's a perfect way to do this. A lot of the comments, like his little jab at Peter. Yeah, he's still single. Yeah, there's someone out there for him, and she better be really out there for, I believe, next season. Remember that comment, because we're going to come back to a plot line like that when we get to an episode. I don't got the DVD's right over there, but I don't want to reach over a bunch of stuff and grab it. Well, Amy and Robert do appreciate Ray's toast, and then we get to their first dance, which apparently Phil Rosenthal and Monica Horan, who plays Amy and are married in real life, they actually did a similar dance to what we see Robert and Amy do at their real life wedding. Now, instead of like a slow dance, it is a quick one, and it is to a remix of Elvis Presley's A Little Less Conversation, which, given all the stuff that's happened between these two, it's a very apt song. I did not understand the context for why this would be the song they would pick when I first saw this episode, but having rewatched it, it fits just from the main lyrics. Little less conversation, a little bit more action. Yeah, it definitely fits these two. And then moving back and forth, ending with the kiss, and then showing the montage of all the wedding photos before it goes to credits. Perfect way to end this episode. And if, like how Phil and Ray were talking about before this season, if this had ended up being the final season, not only would this have been the perfect season finale to go on, this moment of them finally getting married, all the montage, would have been the perfect moment for this show to go off on. At the height of its popularity, height of its ratings, height creativity with its creative, and then of course this big moment to end the show on. Would have been a nice way to go out on. Just like before the Fresh Prince got those other 2 seasons for syndication going out with the graduation, would have been good. But of course, syndication talk there. It's kind of interesting they both got additional seasons after a good moment like that. But here is because they were still on top creatively, even though, as I've mentioned a couple times before, that topness does start to go down a bit with the next 2 seasons. Not to say that they're bad, but you can kind of feel it. Now, whether that statement will be edited by the time I'm done reviewing those 2 seasons, that's yet to be seen. Now, one thing I do have to mention about this, and this is definitely something that's edited in for syndication for some reason, is that when you watch this episode in syndication, it doesn't end with the photo montage. It comes back from break, and we go back to the wedding dance, where the DJ tells the parents, Ray and Deborah, to join in one at a time, and then they're all dancing, and then it's a fade to black with them all dancing. Now, in the original episode, I could see why that would be cut for time, depending on how long the commercial breaks are, amongst other stuff. And syndication is added to kind of pad it out, so just split into 2. But the one thing I don't get is, if they had filmed that, and this box set was released years later, like this episode was, would have been 03. And this DVD was originally released in 06. There's no reason for that montage not to be on here. Now, I'm not putting it on the Peacock version, I get, but that's the thing. The Peacock version is the same version that's on this. That's how I know that's a syndication only thing. So it's like, why didn't they put it on the box set, even as just an added little bonus for it? It's just one of those weird things. Like that one edited thing from War to Everest. I get why they put it on there, even though that should have been a TV only edit, not a DVD edit, which annoyed the crap out of me. But here with that thing, it's like no reason not to put it on there. And it's just one of those things that it kind of kills the ending of the episode a little bit for me, but that's mainly because I was used to seeing that as a little addendum. And I think that makes a stronger little addendum, is to come back and then have it slowly fade out to black. Now, this episode did get some Emmy love, as I mentioned before. Doris Roberts won her Emmy that year, not only for performance in Marie's Vision, but for performance here. And if there's any one moment that you can definitely say she won it for, it is the moment in the chapel. I mean, there's other little moments here and there, but that's the main one. The way she performs that speech there, you definitely say she deserved it. And Brad Garrett won his Emmy that year for his performance in Just a Formality and this episode. And you can say the same thing for that scene. And then Just a Formality is the moments where he's talking with the family. And then, of course, the proposal. Definitely well earned. And, of course, it's still sad to say that Peter Boyle was the only major one who never won an Emmy for this show. There's a lot of moments he could say he should have won for, but after this, probably not that many, other than maybe one moment we get to, which I think is next season. Well, we'll see. Now, as for little minor characters, the DJ is played by John C. McDonnell, who prolific character actor, a lot of little small bits. And then, of course, Reverend Stevens is played by Chelsea Ross, who, of course, if you are a fan of cinema, will recognize as Captain Talcott from Basic Instinct. I mean, I thought he looked familiar when I was rewatching it, but I didn't realize it was that. It just shows how far along that is. There's not really much else to say about this episode, other than, of course, as something I mentioned before, this is the first season finale of this show that is not a flashback episode. But at this point, with how old the actors are and all they've covered, what kind of flashback could they really do that would be a season finale? I mean, we've already seen why they live across the street. We've seen how they got married, how they met, Robert's divorce. We saw how Allie was born. And then, of course, their first time. There's no really other major milestone to cover there. You know, outside the little joke flashback we saw in season 2. There's nothing really else that they could cover in flashback that they couldn't cover in just dialogue. So I could see why they decided to kind of drop that after this, because the next two season finales, and of course the last one being a series finale, are just straight episodes. But of the three that are non-flashbacks, I'd say this is probably the strongest overall. But it's kind of hard to beat a wedding of characters you want to see get married for a long time. Now, after this, it's going to be episodes that I saw first run, which is mainly going to be next season. And it's not going to be everyone, which when there's a long break, I will mention when the long break happens and which one I pick it up with. Why? Mainly I can say probably busy and having to do other stuff on the night when the episode came on, or not knowing what nights it came on and just catching them again randomly. Because this was a time where it was mainly through TV guides, or if you decided to look far enough ahead, if you happen to have a type of box where you could do that, you do that. Not really a lot of DVR unless you had stuff like TiVo back then. With that one, it'll mainly be that. Season 9, it will mainly be from watching it on the DVD. And there's only a couple episodes in that season I remember off the top of my head. The one about Deborah's parents, of course the finale. The one involving Tasteless Frank and his foot. But that one will just be all DVD ones. And we'll talk about what I think about the writing once we get to those ones. Season 9, there's not as many episodes. Now, at the time they did that, they said it was because of Peter Boyle negotiating a vacation. But if you look at it now, it probably had to do a little bit with his health. And probably also them not wanting to do another full-on season, but wanting to do one where it's close enough to it in length. And of course, later on would be when Peter died, not even a year later. Funny enough, he passed away around the same time as my grandmother, who introduced me to this show. They died, I think, like a day apart, or a couple days apart at least, because the announcement of his death was on TV when we were at Grandma's side, and she was on her deathbed, literally. So there's that. Beginning of next season, there'll be an interesting little thing we'll talk about money-wise, which is very appropriate given what's going on in the world of TV and cinema as I write this, as I record this with the strike, so something very interesting there, knowing what you're worth and all. So that'll be topical. But of course, all that we'll have to wait for next time when we get into Season 8. Until then, everybody.